Welcome to Building My Legacy podcast. This podcast is designed for leaders and entrepreneurs who want to leave a legacy and will provide strategies that focus upon key elements for legacy creation, determining your desired impact and its benefit, increasing your legacy's reach by engaging key stakeholders, planning, prioritizing, and executing. Here's your host, Dr. Lois Sonstegard.
Welcome, everybody, to today's Building My Legacy podcast. I have with me today Neil Sahota. I put a little bit of a Japanese twist on that end. Neil is fascinating in terms of his background. There's so many people right now that are looking at, they want to be innovative. They want to create innovative products. I hear a lot of people talking about artificial intelligence and the various components of that. Well, today we have an expert in our presence who has done all of that. Neil is an IBM Master Inventor, a United Nations Artificial Intelligence Advisor, Chief Innovation Officer, and globally recognized speaker and author. He is a founding member of the United Nations Artificial Intelligence for Good initiative, and he's here to talk to us about Disrupt the Box. Neil, you also have an AKA called Game Changer. I think that's what you've been all about. But tell us, how did you get started in this game?
Honestly, Lois, it was a complete accident. I never planned any of this. I've just been the guy that sought the challenge and the opportunity to learn. And that kind of opened up my mind, if you will, to possibilities.
Wow. So if we just have an inquisitive nature and we're willing to explore, you say that we can do a lot. I'm fascinated. So go on, tell us your story.
Well, I started off my career as a management consultant, and everyone's looking for that innovative or disruptive idea. And it's hard to do. We get used to things and we don't realize we can't see the forest from the trees anymore. And at least being a consultant, you have the kind of fresh eyes, but I was always the kind of guy to think either outside the box or say why even have a box? You have the wrong box.
Oh, got it.
And so that helped me do things like help Starbucks actually re-enter the Chinese market successfully, but kind of rebranding their experience from Italian barista to an American coffee shop experience, to helping Disney identify the Marvel acquisition, what they could do with that. And it led me into AI, because 16 years ago I had people like Michael Eisner and Warren Buffett saying, Neil, it's amazing what computers are telling us. And I'm thinking, they're actually not telling us anything. We just have some tools to collect data, store it, can slice and dice and make nice looking reports. But I started thinking to myself, but could a machine think and draw insight from information? And that's how I wound up actually going into AI.
Got it. And so you've done, when you were with IBM, you worked with IBM's Watson, which has been heralded as an incredible tool within healthcare. So why artificial intelligence for you?
I think it was really about tapping into data and making data-driven decisions. And we had suddenly this flood of data coming in, and it's like, as human beings, we can be good about putting together a 10,000 jigsaw puzzle piece here, right? And do it kind of quickly. But we're now dealing with a billion pieces, right? We can't even fathom that. And it's like, this is actually a grand opportunity to find those things and accelerate change, accelerate help, if we could augment human intelligence with artificial intelligence. And so seeing kind of that natural symbiosis is what helped kind of drive me into AI, not just in terms of the technology, but understanding how we as people can take advantage of this as a tool.
So you talk about the framework that you've put together called Talkbow. What is that framework?
The Talkbow stands for think different, understand different, create different, be different, own different. And it's something I developed from my work that actually helped me identify these kind of disruptive opportunities. And it's more than just ideation. The think different is really, okay, let me start formulating the ideas. And the understand is, okay, where's really the value and the market need, and am I aligned with that? And then the create different is, how do I actually implement this? Be different is, how do I actually launch this into market? And then own different is, how do I build the infrastructure and the buy-in to be successful? Maybe a simple example most people would get is Tesla, because they weren't the first electric vehicle, but they've been wildly successful. And why is that? Well, nice design, they're kind of fast. And it's like, but that wasn't the reason. The biggest problem that people had was they were worried about running out of electric charge. And the one thing Tesla did that no one else had done before was build the infrastructure. Like, for people to buy our cars, we'll put in EV charging stations everywhere, right? Take away the reason to say no. And so that's, I think, what a lot of people don't get. They just think, I need this aha moment to come up with this disruptive idea and, back up the Brinks truck. It's like, no, the idea is never an aha moment. It's kind of a collection of small things that lead up, but you got to do it soup to nuts, and you got to be fully committed to the disruption to actually be successful.
So define disruption, because we talk about that word loosely, and I think a lot of people think just a different idea is a disruption. So tell me, what do you think for you? How do you define that?
That's a great question, Lois. For me, a disruption is finding a whole new way of actually performing the work or doing something, right? So you think about, Airbnb or Uber and Lyft, right? And you talk about, they're considered very disruptive technologies, disruptive business models. And that's because, think about at the heart of what they're doing. Airbnb is one of the largest quote unquote hoteling companies, yet they own no real estate, right? How could you sell people or rent people rooms when you don't own any of them? That's a whole new way of doing this. That's what I call disruption.
Got it. So going back, disruption along with your Talkbow framework, how do you get people to think disruptively? Out of the box. And you talk about out of the box is still in the box. So talk about that, please.
The universe is full of boxes, so we can't see. I have some techniques that I actually have people apply. We all know kinds of bits and pieces and how we kind of put them together. But like with the think different aspect to ideate, I always say that there's three things you can always do to flush something out. The first is, could you repurpose or multi-purpose something? So I know I'm dating myself here, but if you remember the Exxon Valdez oil spill back in the 80s, right? It was massive. They were trying to clean up as fast as possible. They were getting fined, but the prevailing methods weren't fast enough. And they actually started a prize campaign. So they said, if someone can come up with a better idea, we'll give you $1 million. And this guy from DuPont, he recommended this kind of like bubble kind of technique. And it worked. It was very fast and it was very effective. And they're like, wow, how'd you ever think of this? And he's just like, well, we've been doing this at DuPont for like 30 years. And we're like, what? And it's like, I just started thinking about it. Like, this is how we clean up chemical spills at DuPont. And oil's like a chemical, so it'd probably work. Repurposed, right? So that's one technique. A second one is to really cultivate a different perspective. And sometimes you have to look at things from a different angle. And I always like to give the example of the film camera, because most people have watched a movie. But the film camera was invented in the 1870s because of a bet. So Leland Stanford, the guy who started Stanford University, he made a bet saying that when a horse gallops, all four hoofs can always be off the ground at the same time. And the guy said, no, one hoof always has to be on the ground. But it was on Leland to prove he was right. And he had no idea how to do that, right? And so he went to a scientist named Edward Moody, thought about it, and set up this experiment. And so they went to this field, set up 100 cameras. You have to have a person at each camera, it's the 1870s. And they had a horse gallop by, and the cameras went off 1 second after the other. And they have a stack of 100 photos. And so they're looking through it, and Leland finds one photo that says, "Oh, here it is. All four horses off the ground. I win my bet," runs off to collect the money. But Edward, even though he's got trying to help Leland win the bet, same data points, he's looking at this and he's like, "I have all these static pictures, but when I flip through them, it's like I'm watching the horse run. It's like motion from stillness." Invents the film camera because he was able to do that because he had a different perspective. He wasn't going to win any money, but he wasn't focused on the singular data point. He could actually look at them as an aggregate and draw insight from that. That was super powerful. And it's hard for us to be able to step back sometimes and take that different perspective. Yeah. So that's another actually key technique we can actually apply to think differently. And then the third technique is to really challenge assumptions. Assumptions aren't like truths, right? It's things that we don't know for sure or not, but we'll believe it's true. We tend to forget that. So one of the oldest assumptions was we have to own cars, right? You want to use a car, you have to own it. Well, the guy from Zipcar challenged that assumption because he one day was thinking like, man, the car is the most expensive thing I own and I barely use it. And he researched it and he realized, hey, wait a second. The average American spends an hour a day in their car. It's idle for 23 hours a day. Why do I have to own that? And he went up coming up with, cars on demand, Zipcar, right? Very successful, disrupted the rental car industry. I believe Avis bought them. But then, of course, you get other people like Uber and Lyft said, like, well, why do you even need a car? People are driving around all over the place. But if you could carpool on demand, boom, we have rideshare. To challenge assumptions. So if you want to think differently, repurpose, multi-purpose, cultivate different perspective, or challenge assumptions.
So I think from what I have observed, people seem to have an easier time challenging assumptions. I think where they have more difficulty is in the first two steps. Your experience, is that right or wrong?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Lois. It's easier to challenge an assumption, right? Or because we're familiar with it. We may not know how to kind of retool something we're doing today or retool something else, some other industry is using. Because I hate to say it, once you start doing something, it's almost like, your commute home. Most people usually take the same path, right? It works. And I don't really think about another path. And as a result, we miss those other opportunities. We don't say like, well, is there a different path home? Can I cultivate a different perspective? Maybe there's a shortcut. Maybe I'll save more gas, or, maybe I don't have to drive home. Maybe I could actually use the bus or something. We never actually, once something works, we never really question it anymore.
So to get people to look at how else something could be used or to look outside, DuPont already had that innovation, but until they were asked, they didn't think about offering it, right? But they could have. They could have done that years before. So as you work with companies, Neil, is there a way you can speed up that process so that kind of knowledge gets shared more quickly and easily?
Yeah, this is the challenge that companies have because they want to do this, but this relies on kind of the soft skills. This is more about communication, collaboration, and creativity. And you just can't, unfortunately, pick up a book or say, here's a framework on how to be creative.
Right.
And so it's harder for companies they want it, but it's hard for them to figure out, how do I give them a box to do this? And that's the problem. Disrupt the box. You don't need to give them a box. You can help them understand techniques and give them opportunities to practice. Because if it becomes second nature, it'll become intuitive in anything they do.
So where do you get the most joy? I think that what you do must be a lot of fun, but where do you get the most joy in what you do?
I'm really big about social good. And that's why I always advocate for social enterprise, social entrepreneurship. But like one of the most amazing things and things I'm probably the most proud of is actually my work with the United Nations. And you
Talk
look
a little
at
bit about that. What you do there?
So I'm their AI advisor, and I help them actually create and launch and run the AI for Good initiative, which is essentially using AI and other emerging technology for the Sustainable Development Goals. Those are 17 goals for a better planet and for better, help people, like zero hunger and poverty, access to health, all these things. I won't bore everyone with the 17, but there's a huge gap in trying to make them a reality. As much as everybody wants them, unfortunately, the member nations haven't been able to commit as much resources as is really needed. So it's really fallen on like volunteers like myself to see how we can do that. And I will tell you, people, the UN is a very slow bureaucratic organization. I don't think even they would dispute that. But the fact that we were talking about this and the process of actually setting up, they moved like entrepreneurs, right? Actually kind of going through the Talkbow workshop I have, this kind of stuff. They really saw the value, and they saw how the value would meet the need, that they went from this slow moving organization to moving at the speed of a startup. Oh. I mean, we got the whole thing launched in like 4 months, which was unbelievable. And like a lot of people, other people in the different parts of the UN, like, whoa, how the world did you guys do this? It took us 2 years to this small project, get the small project off the ground, get this big worldwide initiative, build an ecosystem in just a matter of a few months. Well, I say it's very impactful, but I also tell people, like, if the UN can do that, then you can do anything.
Got it. And what the SDGs have done tremendously is to look at public-private sector collaboration. And so that takes me back to what you talked about a little while ago, and that is collaboration. That really a key component of this is collaboration. Speak a little bit more about that, because that's also a tool set that most organizations don't naturally have.
Yeah, you're right, Lois. Unfortunately, they don't. And we always say there's power in diversity of thought. That's one of the things about collaboration. And we can talk about looking at things from a different perspective. That's what people bring together when they work together. Like when I was in business school, your first year, they put you in these groups, and the school sets the group. But they set the groups, there's one person from marketing, one person from finance, one person from operations, and so forth. And when you're working like on the same case study together, everyone sees it so differently. But you realize everyone has a piece of the jigsaw puzzle, right? And now you can start snapping together if you start talking, working together. And that's the big thing. I think for most companies, they think we have smart people, they know what to do. Problem is, everyone's gotten so specialized, they know one piece, right? You want the real value, you got to put the pieces together. And that's why you have to create a collaborative environment.
So how have you done that? I mean, you're doing that with the UN. How have you done it with the businesses that you also consult with?
That's a good question. It's a lot of organizational change management. So this is more than saying we're going to throw everybody into a giant conference room or we'll do an offsite retreat for a day. This is actually about building a culture and creating a culture that comes top down, where the executives are coming and say, like, we're going to give you the opportunities to work together. We're going to reward you if you guys do work together. We're going to have shared goals, but we're also going to create an environment where no one will be punished for failure and no one will be punished for speaking their mind, right? As long as they're professional. That's the key thing. And it's those last two things where I think most companies actually stumble, right? Because they're like, I want the good stuff, but I don't want people to make mistakes. And it's like, it's going to go hand in hand. It's a learning process, right? If people are used to having so much work and being heads down on their tasks, they don't know how to collaborate, right? That's not a knock on them. That's just not a style they're used to build a culture.
So you take care of those two issues of people speaking their mind, being able to speak what they think safely, and then also take risks. So taking away that fear of failure. That is a big culture shift in organizations because we're measuring numbers all the time, right? So,
yeah, it is.
So how do you begin that process? That's a huge shift that CEOs have to make if they've got boards of directors. That's a huge risk they take with the board. So how do you navigate that?
You start with the leadership and you make the case on the value, right? Risk is not a bad thing. Risk means uncertainty. It can be positive or it can be negative. So you can look at it as a threat or you can look at it as an opportunity. And so you take like the UN, for example. It's a collection of 47 agencies. Historically, they never even worked together. And here I am, this guy talking about this giant initiative and having them collaborate, not just with each other, but collaborate with outside organizations, right? And you can just, the eyes are going like this. And it just starts as like, if you really want to, this is the goal you really want to achieve, you don't have the resources internally to do it, right? If you partner with if you go partner, you get the WHO on board, they'll bring in some of the medical expertise and some of those things. You go work with UNICEF, they're going to bring the expertise on how we can help children. And so you try and create these things and say, look, someone's going to have to be the first one to kind of show their cards, right? It's got to start somewhere. So yeah, some people may not quite play fair. You got to learn how to manage that. But if the UN's always been about optics and playing it safe, not making any mistakes, but it's like, again, how much have you accomplished? Like not nearly as much as we need to. So it's like, is it worth it? Look at it as a threat or look at it as an opportunity. And I managed to convince leadership this is an opportunity.
How do you get people to play fair?
I think most people are actually good. There's a small percentage that they're always going to kind of double deal or game the system. But I think most people they want to be good, they want to play fair. And if you treat them well, and I think if you're relatively open and you help them understand what they get out of it, the WIFM, what's in it for me, they'll usually come along and support you and do their best to help make you successful. And if they don't agree, I find that most of them will tell you that now. They'll say, okay, I don't believe this, or it's not enough value. And so at least right? You don't need to waste people's time. But these are hard conversations. That's the challenge. And too many people right now are shying away from having them.
Because why?
I think they're afraid to look weak, or they're afraid to look ignorant, right? They look at this is like, I can't show that everyone thinks I'm this, let's call it 100%, when in reality, I think I'm this 70%. I don't want people to see that gap. And I think we're starting to kind of move away from that, where people are realizing, like, I need people to understand the 70%. I need people to understand where I need help. Otherwise, I'll never actually get the help I need.
Got it. Asking for help, no matter who you are, where you're struggling or what your business is, that's one of the biggest things. It's one of the biggest problems people have with getting a coach or getting a business strategist or, whatever, so that the business can really thrive. It's that fear. Will I be judged? Will I be shamed? And the list goes on, doesn't it? Neil, who's your ideal client? Who comes to seek you out?
It's people that are really trying to solve a big problem or unlock an opportunity. So I mean, it's been obviously the United Nations. It's been global Fortune 500 companies. It's been small entrepreneurs. It's been nonprofits. But my ideal clients, they're looking to unlock something or solve a problem, and they're committed to actually doing that. Right? This is not like, well, it's too risky, or it's this. It's like they're like, I genuinely want to help protect kids from child abuse. Right? A nonprofit called Zero Abuse Project, and they're like, we've done a lot of things to help survivors stuff, but we haven't figured out how to help prevent in the first place. Mm-hmm. And they were, in conversations, they were willing to say, like, look, we will put in the resources, the money, whatever, if we can reduce how many children are abused in the first place. And that's one, I love the fact they're doing something so good. The second, the fact that they and their donor base said, like, we need to do this. That's kind of the ideal client. They're like, we're open to the possibilities. Help us find them.
So there's a certain amount of idealism that your clients have, right? They also have access to capital because they can afford to be idealistic and work on solving a problem.
It's true. It doesn't mean you need a lot of capital. It depends on the size of your problem, right? There's actually a small startup company I help out where they're actually using AI to try and help depressed and suicidal teens. And what they're trying to figure out is they've got something that works. The two guys that started the company, one's a therapist, the other one's actually a neurolinguist. The biggest problem is that as they approach, clinics and stuff, and even people they know, there's not a lot of people believe AI can do this. Be a tool for psychologists and therapists. And so where I'm really helping them is trying to figure out how to, one, establish better credibility, but two, break through this barrier. That's not something that requires a lot of capital, but it requires a lot of investment of their time and willingness to build this infrastructure that they actually need to establish the credibility.
Right. And infrastructure is huge, isn't it? And it's looking at how do you create those adjacent markets to really build what you're trying to do, because you need that support in order to make that happen. Neil, our time is almost up. What have we left out that's important for people to know? This has been wonderful to have this conversation.
I appreciate it. I think it's been a great one. And the one thing I just want to leave people with is it doesn't matter how big or small you are. Everyone actually has the power to disrupt the box. Don't think you need to be a genius like Elon Musk, or you have to have a lot of money like a GE or any of these things. We actually all have the capability. We just have to learn how to tap into it. And hopefully, a little bit we shared about Talkbow and some of these other stories can help you kind of draw upon that well and be a disruptor.
You also have a book, AI Revolution, correct?
That's right. It's called Own the AI Revolution. It's a business book for non-technical business leaders that, one, helps kind of shows how you disrupt the box a bit, but do that through the capabilities of AI.
Got it. We will have information about the book in the show notes for those of you who are listening. So I encourage you to go to Amazon. I'm sure it's on Amazon, right?
It is Amazon, all the bookstores.
And all the bookstores, and learn about it, because I think that we're going to all be challenged to think more and more about AI as we move forward into the future. Neil, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure, Lois. This was a blast.
You are so welcome. And those of you who are listening to Building My Legacy podcast today, thank you for being with us. And remember to also visit our website at www.buildtomorrow2.com. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to Building My Legacy podcast with Dr. Lois Sonstegard. To book your appointment with Dr. Sonstegard, visit www.buildtomorrow.com.